Simon Thomas, welcome back to the Pacey Performance Podcast. It's been a long time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a few years now, but so I've stayed connected over the years and listening, and so it's good to be back.
No, thank you for making time. Although it sounds like you got lots of time with the snow day.
Yeah,
to have a chat, which is good.
plenty of time today.
Would you be absolutely the rare snow day where you are?
Yeah, everybody told me it's always warm in Texas, but so I think just before I got here last year, they had a snowstorm, and everyone was hoping it wouldn't come again this year, but it has. So training's cancelled today, and we're inside, and the snow's outside, and the roads are closed because they don't know how to fix them in Texas like they do in some of the more.
Sounds like the UK.
Yeah.
Everything turns to chaos with an inch of snow.
Yeah, I think they know how to handle it better in some of the other states and cities, but Texas gets a bit freaked out. So it's good just to tuck away, and then hopefully we can kick off this weekend and there's not too much snow around, and we can just get the games going.
Absolutely. Would you be able to give us a bit of an update? I'm sure there's plenty that's happened in the last 5 years, but career update?
Yeah, it's been a great change. I was sort of just kicking into taking over the Crusader program when we'd last talked, and I think we just finished our first season where I had been able to lead that program, and so really enjoyed sort of three more years with them since that point with our coaching group and trying to grow that group as much as possible. And that was a place that was sort of dear to my heart. I grew up watching that team, and so managed to be able to contribute to a little bit of success on field over those 4 years. And I had just re-signed on for 2 more years actually, and then opportunity came up to come over here to Austin, Texas, in the MLR, and its sort of 4th season of existence, and help out a coach that I knew who was transitioning from Japan across to the US, and kind of grow something new, build something new. And the challenge was exciting to come and sort of sow some seeds and water them and try to help grow something special from the ground up, really, rather than try to find new ways to polish the diamond that was already shining pretty brightly with a whole bunch of All Blacks. And so it was a great way to get out of my comfort zone and come and try something new and just get an adventure being over in the US and have access to so many other sports to knock on the door of and different events and places to go and see. So it's been an interesting transition, but instead I really enjoyed those years with the Crusaders and what we were able to do with the group coming through there, and left a little bit earlier than planned, but for good reason. When I weighed all of the things up, there's just a lot of opportunity up here to try something new and really expand out and learn and grow.
Has the MLR kind of settled down? Obviously, like you say, 4 years. It's settled down in terms of the structure and the financial side, because I'm sure there was a lot of critics 3 or 4 years ago when it kicked off. Has that seemed to settle now and it's into a bit of a flow?
Seems to be. I think going into season 5, you sort of get to a bit more of a stable point usually, and it feels like it's hit some stability rather than the instability, even through the challenges of COVID. Really, teams aren't dropping left, right, and centre and being sold off and changing hands, and teams are actually entering the competition rather than leaving it. So Dallas are coming in this year. I think there's 2 more teams coming in next year. So it's growing from 12 to 13 to 15. So they've got some targets that they want to reach as a competition, but it's not trying to grow too fast too soon where it can kind of burn out and blow out. So it's definitely still at ground level. You say the players' salaries are modest, and teams don't all have their own facilities, and everybody's sort of borrowing soccer turf stadiums to play games at and trying to fill those out before they build their own, apart from one of the teams at Houston that have built their own sort of stadium. So
wow.
So it's starting to come. Teams are starting to enter some long-term sort of 10-year partnerships with different universities and building grounds that will be theirs that they'll play at, and some commercial sponsors are starting to come on board, and you're starting to get a little bit more broadcast. Everything in professional sports driven by broadcast deals. So it's following the pathway that the MLS, the soccer, sort of followed over here, but they're into the 20-something years of that competition now, and they're just starting to turn a profit and hit their straps. So it's been really interesting. It feels like it's stable and ready to launch, and it's certainly gathering a few more eyeballs, and the US aiming to host the Rugby World Cup in I think it's 2031 potentially that they're looking to host it. So you kind of got 9 or 10 years to build the rugby infrastructure and the fan base to make that a real success. So there's a lot of things happening. So owners are a little bit more stable, and some are putting more into the infrastructure of their clubs than others, but those that are really building professional programs are leading the way, and others are just really having to follow suit to make sure that they deliver a good product on the field for the fans.
Anyone that does any searching of you guys as AG Rugby online may be confused with the name. I was very confused. It sounds like you get the question a lot. Explain to us the name.
It does. Every time we go through an airport, people ask us either what's a Gilgroni or what's AG Rugby. And if we say, it's easy to say we're a rugby team and then explain the game, but as soon as people ask you what's a Gilgroni, we go down the rabbit hole of explaining. But essentially it's our owner, Gilly, Adam Gilchrist. He's an Australian who he owns F45 globally, and but he also owns a couple of drinks companies up here in the US, and one of them's a Gilly Lager, and he names all of those after himself. So he owns us in Austin, and we're the Gilgronis, and we're named after his version of a Negroni, and he owns the team in LA, who are the Giltinis, who are named after his version of a martini. So we've sort of we've pivoted a little bit within our marketing towards AG Rugby being our main tag. The Giltinis, they've got a martini glass or a Giltini glass as their logo, so they've really embraced it up in LA. So it's definitely it caused a bit of a stir, if you want to use a pun, but it did cause a stir and shake things up when it was first announced, and people sort of weren't sure how they felt about it, or they were very sure that they didn't like it. But it is what it is. You say we've got an owner who's willing to support what we're doing as a club and pay the bills and fund the things that we want to do, and he just really wants to grow the game. He's an Aussie that wants to see the game explode in America, not just professionally, but in the youth area and community space as well. So he's really pushing the league on trying to shift some things forward in a number of different areas, and he can do it in a pretty pushy way, because that's what's made him successful in business. But it takes somebody to shake things up and rattle the cage and really push for progression to get things to go to another level.
Nice. One thing I want to touch on, when people go to the States, either from the UK or from Oz or like yourself from New Zealand, I'm always interested about the cultural aspect, because it's a big thing. Like it's a big dream for a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, performance coaches, like I say, from Europe or from Oz, to make the transition. And whether people think about it or not, that's a big cultural shift, especially to move somewhere, I would imagine, not that I've been, but to somewhere like Texas. Give us a little bit of insight into the cultural differences that you're dealing with as what you're dealing with from an established nation in rugby, like the most established nation in rugby, to the US where it's not established at all.
It is really different. That's one of the things I've really enjoyed too. One of the challenges we sort of chose, those of us that have come here to help kind of grow the game and build the game. And some things take a while to get used to. Like our marketing team understand America and we understand rugby, and we have to Americanize the product a little bit to get the American sports fan to watch, which means that you get your broadcast deal and become more professional, and there's more within the game. So even things like having the players' individual names on the back of the jerseys seems foreign to some of us who are like, no, it's about the team, not the individual. But people want to know who the players are because they don't know them, and so running the players out and announcing them individually was really foreign to us, because we're like, no, you enter as a team because it's about the team, it's not about being an individual. But the US sports landscape's very much about individual success and individual branding and kind of knowing who the names and faces are within the group. So there are some of the things that have been, say, different for us as rugby people to kind of get used to, but it's a lot of it seems to have hit the mark. We did a little bit of a behind the scenes documentary through our season in 2021, sort of a 6-part series that's broadcasted on Fox Sports over here, and it's free online on the Rugby Network, of just 6 20-minute episodes that followed us from the start through to the finish of our season, and the camera was behind the scenes on everything. And so that's a lot harder to do at home when people are a lot more fixed in how they go about things, whereas here everybody's just open to everything because it's new and everyone's come to help or to make a difference or to do things a little bit differently. So Sam as a head coach is very much a yes to everything mindset, because he just wants to get as much exposure for the sport and for the players and for the game as possible, whereas in a very established group, you're a lot more closed around, who can come in the door and who can see what's happening, and because you're not trying to engage as many people with what's going on behind the scenes and show them behind the curtain. So it's been really good. It's been really open. It's been a lot less probably traditional. Even you try to mix up your marketing strategies in a country like New Zealand to attract new fans, and all the purists hate what you're doing, and the people that just want to come along and sit quietly, and you have to earn the fact that they clap when you score a try. They've come to tell you, how bad you are unless you earn their respect, or they sit there quietly and tell people to sit down instead of making noise. And so the American sports fans the opposite, and so they definitely go all in when they like something. And the fan base here, they haven't grown up with the game. They've found it at some point and fallen in love with it. So that there's a lot more of, it's like an amateur club type connection to the game within the fan base than the expectation that you probably get within a professional and established environment. So you can do a lot of different things around your match day experience, and there aren't the purists around to grumble about it. So that's actually pretty cool to be able to do things differently and have that flexibility. So it's certainly not at the Showtime level that the NBA or the NFL or some of those sports are at, and it won't be. It's not going to compete with the big three, but it can certainly establish a place in the sporting landscape here pretty quickly, because the football fans like seeing people hit people, and they're not used to seeing people hit people without pads on. So when they come along, they love it. And they love the fact that the game doesn't stop every 10 seconds and everyone's on the sideline. And so it's catching on really quickly. Like Sam sort of says, there's 300 million rugby fans that just don't know it yet over here. So culturally, you've got guys in your team, you've got players that within the MLR, they either haven't made it in the major professional competitions, or they've made it in those competitions, but they may not make it anymore and they're finishing out their career and wanting to contribute, or they haven't made it yet and they're taking an opportunity to grow themselves before they then crack it in those other competitions. So there's a real mix, but everybody's kind of there for a reason, and everybody's really probably well connected with why they're playing the game, and they're professional, but they're not. They're certainly not at a level where they've lost the love for the game, or they've forgotten what it's like just to be a 5-year-old running around with your mates and a ball. So it's been pretty cool. It's been very different though. It's definitely different, but we just hope that it keeps on growing. It keeps on growing and establishing itself within the American sporting culture. And so we don't get to come across and run a performance program out of a $500 million college football facility. We're sort of running out of a little warehouse with some offices, but we've been able to do a great job of setting up a performance sort of gym we were working out of, and we've got a training field down the road that we go and use. And it reminds me a lot of my early days when I was at Tasman, and we were kind of piecing things together, and then it'll kind of grow from there. But we also know we don't want to outgrow ourselves too quickly, and we probably don't need a $500 million college football facility, because we don't have that many athletes, and we certainly don't have that many boosters funding us to get to that point too, and we probably wouldn't want to create that level of expectation either. So we want to be able to get the balance right, and we seem to have a good culture within rugby over here, where the players that we've got haven't come through those systems where they've been handed everything, so their level of expectation isn't extremely high, and so they just get on with the job and knuckle down and do the hard stuff, and they just want to get better.
So what would your attendance be at AG Rugby?
This weekend with the snow, probably nobody. I think we managed to. You end up selling. You sell tickets in the kind of the 2,000 to 5,000 sort of mark, and then I think with tickets being $5, if it's that cold, people probably don't see that as a huge loss if they choose not to go. But yeah, I mean, LA played a game at SoFi last year in the stadium there, which is where the Super Bowl's being played next weekend. And I mean, I think it cost a fair bit to play the game there, but that was just a part of our owner wanting to put rugby on the map in the US. And you know, it was a huge stadium, and it certainly wasn't full, but it was the first sort of sporting event that was allowed fans that was played in that stadium post-COVID, which is a pretty cool way to put the game on the map and into people's minds. And so there's some really cool stadiums, some really some small ones and some big ones. LA play at the Coliseum, which is where USC football play out of, and so there's a lot of empty red seats when they play there, but the coaches sit up in the high box and can see the Hollywood sign in the background, and they light the Olympic flame before the game. And so there's a lot of small stadiums and big stadiums, but it's a general attendance is sort of somewhere in that 2,000 to 5,000 sort of mark, which is probably why teams will build a 8 to 12,000 seater stadium and follow some of the smaller stadium type model like over in the Premiership, rather than trying to play in international size stadiums like Super Rugby does and then struggles to fill it. So but it's good, it's growing, and every time somebody comes that's new, they enjoy it, and they bring somebody back the next time, and they bring somebody back the next time, and hopefully it grows exponentially. Like, would rather that spread than COVID.
You're not wrong. You are not wrong. So let's dive into the beginning of the conversation, because it's coming from a little bit of controversy on social media that I was witnessing. And if I'd have been the marketing guru, I'd have jumped on this straight away. You'd have been on 3 weeks ago, and we'd have struck while the iron's hot. However, it's calmed down a little bit, which is good for all parties. And it was around your preseason camp. A few videos circulated, a little bit of shit thrown for various different reasons, and we'll dive into that in a minute. But not to give the controversy too much airtime, but just to dive into developing a camp, structuring a camp itself, and how you make decisions of what you do, what you don't do, how that's perceived, how that's not perceived, and things are right and things are wrong. So going back to the start, with regards to preseason camp, what's your first port of call when structuring what will hopefully be a successful preseason camp?
Yeah, we've been able to. It's certainly got a bit of traction, a great bit of airtime across social media. But like anything, it goes out the 24-hour washing cycle on social media until somebody kind of loops it back up again. So, but yeah, I think when we had an opportunity to get a training camp this year, which was great. Through COVID and snowstorms last year, we didn't get any time together as a group going into the season. So it was a pretty quick turnaround, and people were landing from overseas, and we just had to start playing. And so we got a great opportunity this year to spend 2 weeks down in Chula Vista, just outside San Diego, and then the key objectives sort of out of that camp were around gluing our team together as people and building connections and getting further advanced on our rugby just by being able to get out on the field every day, a couple of times a day, and train and prepare and find our rhythm as a group and really establish what our identity is as a team moving forward, and drawing that out of the people that we've got, rather than trying to pluck something out of thin air and try and find the best words and write them on the wall and then try and figure out what that looks like. Which, say good teams and shit teams have the same words on the wall, but some people live them and some people don't, and some pluck them from elsewhere and some draw them from within. So we really wanted to establish the actions that were important to us, and then let some values sort of materialize out of what those actions are that are important. So they were probably the three kind of key objectives of our camp, and most of it was just around being able to spend time together and establish ourselves and where we want to get to and where we're at now, and a little bit of reflection on where we were last year and what some of the missing parts were, and why we missed the playoffs, and why we didn't execute in key moments, and why we didn't take some of the opportunities that were in front of us, and some of the little things that came up on a consistent basis through the season that led to us not executing in key moments in some games and things like that, which are there's some off-field things and some on-field things that all added up at times that meant that we just didn't nail big moments when they came and didn't take those opportunities, and other teams did, and then instead of making the finals, we missed out narrowly and gave ourselves too much of a chase to try and get there. So we had a lot of different strategies around how we wanted to get that, and Chula Vista gave us an awesome venue at the Olympic Training Centre where the US Sevens are based. So everybody was in the same accommodation, which was important to us because we could just get organic collisions and connections and people eating together and talking together and having more conversations than meetings, and away from other commitments and other distractions, and just being able to connect as a group, and to be able to do that for just enough time before it got too much time away from family. And is where I think some of our general managers suggested going for 3 weeks, but the experience of touring overseas for 3 weeks, and knowing that people get a bit scratchy by the time week 3 comes around, and 2 weeks it's good, but it's kind of enough if you've got the choice. That we settled on kind of 2 weeks away, with the ability to do that and finish it with a game and have everything build up towards getting some match minutes against San Diego at the end of that camp. The food was easily done because it's run out of a dining room and a cafeteria that delivers food for athletes just like clockwork around the clock, and you just go and scan your card and line up. So that reduced the logistics for our dietitian. So she spent less time organising menus and putting food out for people, and she spent more time having conversations with individual players about what they can work on and how they can make better choices in the dining room, and how they can transfer that to their plates and their cooking back home. So there's a world-class sort of gym facility right there. The field's right behind us, and it took away a lot of the logistics that we would cope with on a weekly basis at our normal training centre, that just allowed the experts that we have to kind of spend more time with the people, and working on some of those systems with them from a coaching perspective or a performance perspective, and medical and recovery. So we don't have everything that we need where we train here. So we were able to capture that for 2 weeks and maximise our time. And then the other piece was being really fortunate to be just around the corner from the Navy SEALs base and the beach that they all kind of start their training and selection on, which is the piece that got all the airtime. So it's funny, you can do a 15-day camp and 99% of it can be getting your rugby right, and 1% of it can be getting some work done with those guys, and that's the piece that goes viral. But it was really good. I mean, we were really considered in how we went about it. It's not something that I've always looked at fondly from a performance and S&C perspective. Like, I've seen the military style training and doing the military camps and things to try and pull people together, just destroy teams and athletes can lose the value of their entire preseason if you starve them and deprive them of sleep, and then guys that have spent all preseason putting weight on lose all that weight. And I know there was a team we played a couple of years ago in preseason in Super Rugby that went away on sort of a 2 or 3 night kind of military camp after they'd just lost by 40 points twice in preseason. And my thought was, why aren't you just going away working on your defence? Why are you going and starving and keeping people up all night and doing this sort of stuff? So there were some things that we really, from my perspective and our coach's perspective, that we wanted to make sure we really steered clear of within that. But the other side is, everybody's also come to the US to find authentic kind of American experiences, and there was this great opportunity to kind of create one and actually have three or four kind of retired Navy SEALs that have been through a lot of active duty, and they've seen and done a lot of things, and they shared some pretty incredible stories through the day. And so we structured that day, and the key parameters for me were, we're coming in with a few players coming off the back of surgery and some guys that are carrying injuries. So we need to manage those individuals wisely and adapt things so that they can take part in the group experience, but not have to do everything, because that would just be stupid. We didn't take them there to break them. And even the physical side is make sure we've got experts kind of running it who know how to understand where the threshold is and not push people past that breaking point, and then we can't train properly for the next 14 days in a rugby camp. So making sure that the players were able to sleep well. So we landed on the Sunday evening, and the guys had to get up at 3 a.m. the next morning to get ready to go and be on the bus, which pulled out at 4 a.m. So that we pulled out in the darkness, and it was a bit of an unknown. But we'd just come from Texas, so that was 5 a.m. wake up and 6 a.m. on the bus. So really, in terms of body clock, not too bad. But just the overall perception of it is that it's actually quite tough, and that's what we wanted to have the players sort of work their way through. And then the evening before, make sure that they fueled really well and kind of knew they had that early start, and could get a good sleep the night before, knowing that they had to get up and be prepared and be organised, rather than let them go to bed late and then go and kick the doors down and drag them out of bed in the morning as a surprise. So that are some of the conversations and discussions that were important for us to have with the SEALs that were running it, and they were really good, really professional. They have gone through a lot of different things themselves. They've done it with other teams before, and they were really guided by us on some real key parameters, like make sure we don't deprive of sleep, make sure we stop and hydrate and fuel the athletes at the right times, and we don't just starve them all day. And if at any point we needed to give some feedback around adjusting what a player was doing, we could, ourselves or our medical team could kind of step in and do that, and they wouldn't shout us down and tell them to go harder if we'd kind of wanted to make those adjustments. So it was really important to have it well planned strategically, and we found a lot of great things out of it that we had seen on field last year, in terms of a lack of attention to detail at times and poor communication within the group, and not getting things right the first time because people don't pass the message on properly. And there's a lot of different ways that we could do that, but this was a really good way of creating an authentic experience and doing it within that. And we were in and out of the classroom throughout the day, and I think that's sort of some of the pieces that I think the fear in social media from an S&C coach perspective is, a rugby coach is going to watch that 1 minute segment on social media and then come and say, right, we need to take our team out for 14 hours and have them throwing logs around and dunk them underwater and doing sit-ups in the ocean and freezing cold, and not actually seeing the level of planning that goes in behind the curtain to kind of make it work, and the fact that it was a full day that had classroom sessions around leadership and performance under pressure and communication, and room checks around tidiness, and guys being able to kind of learn to be more accountable to the things that they say they're going to do, and having other people take that, which is a pivot from the coach's voice or my voice and the voices they're going to be hearing for the next 6 months over the season, and doing it in a non-rugby way, which for me is, I place a lot of value on. I think if guys are in a rugby environment for 11 months, and if we do just rugby stuff in a rugby context for 11 months, like, it becomes very monotonous within a rugby player's sort of life, and we can tick the same boxes in different ways, and it may do it better, it may do it just the same, but just having that little bit of variation, like any other form of cross-training, whether it's physical or mental. If we wanted to avoid cross-training completely, then we'd never put players in the gym and have them lifting, because Olympic lifting and powerlifting and doing sprint work is cross-training, because they haven't got a ball in their hands and they're not trying to beat a defender. So, but we do as much of it as we need to, and we try to get as much transfer as possible. And so it was the general thinking in behind it, and the feedback that was critical for me was the players throughout the day, the players after the day, and just some of the metrics that we were seeing on the field through the week was really heartening for us to see that players are still hitting some PBs in the middle of the week, 2 or 3 days after that kind of 12-hour experience, where they weren't going hard physically for 12 hours, of course, but it was a long day mentally with little breaks throughout, and they're still hitting some new PBs in terms of max velocities and power in the gym and things like that on the day that we had hoped. And that doesn't come from chucking logs around, of course. That came from 3 weeks of preparation before that, and then having an unloading and recovery and adaptation week before the camp. And then we wanted to be able to see those advancements in physical qualities during the first part of the camp, and make sure that we strategically planned that day with the SEALs to not fuck that up, but to be able to take what we needed from that experience, but not bugger up some of those results that we'd been working towards. And so I'm really happy and confident that we got the balance right in that. But as I say, I understand from my own perspective as well as others the fear of a coach picking that up and ruining a team by trying to do it without putting the amount of thought and planning into the why and the how and other things behind it. So it's great to have an opportunity to give some of the context around that, because if it just becomes a quick social media sensation, then people very quickly draw their own conclusions, and people draw the wrong conclusions, and coaches can run with sort of circus tricks off social media pretty quickly these days. So
were you conscious of the perception from a performance industry perspective? Were you conscious of the perception of how that you may be viewed in this circumstance?
Yeah, I think it's something we were conscious of going through, because we turn everything that we do outwards, and then you sort of see, like I've been for years and years, I've been saying that those sort of things are done so poorly, and they have very limited value and more risk than reward. And so it was a great challenge to find a way to execute that and make the rewards outweigh the risks just by mitigating all of the risks in the best way possible. So that's why I think when we always get frustrated as a performance coach, because we know that results comes from just relentlessly nailing the basics again and again and again and not getting bored with it. But the only stuff that gets the exposure is the random stuff quite often. So and people very quickly forget that it's a small piece of a very big puzzle, and it gets hinged on that. So that's probably the awareness that we have. And as I said, it's great to have people reach out and ask questions around how we go about it and make sure that it isn't a complete disaster and done the wrong way, because there is a right way to do most things, and it's just around where it fits within your context and what you're trying to achieve out of it, and how you go about it and mitigate any risks and maximize any rewards. So, which I'm confident that we were able to do, and we've seen the results from it sort of throughout the group in terms of improvement in those areas that we'd seen on field and then showed up in another context, and the players really highlighting that it's not an isolated thing, like it's popping up. These things, there's communication and accountability, and some of these things are popping up everywhere because they're a theme and a trend that we need to get better at as a group. So as I said, the valuable feedback for me is the way that we train through the week and some of the results we've been able to put out on the pitch sort of since that point, that don't necessarily just come from that activity, but at least they give us the confidence that we got the balance right with that activity, and it wasn't detrimental to what we were doing, and it added some value. So as I say, it's always good to be able to put the context to it when something it gets exposure, because any specific exercise that anybody does, sometimes without context, if a team's doing a form of post-match conditioning, or there was one of the football teams that was doing bicep curls out on the sideline as a part of their kind of pre-game warm-up and prep, but you don't fully understand the context that's operating in, and then everybody can form their own opinion about it, and it's if you don't like it, don't do it in your program. So if you happen to be operating with a team, so you say you're always aware of how things are perceived, and there's definitely a sort of a heightened awareness around that, with a lot of both positive and negative feedback, and a lot of people sort of reaching out privately and either asking questions or giving support or challenging things, which is great. So if we're not challenging each other on what we're doing, then some pretty silly things can get out of hand very quickly, and you say people get hurt and don't perform when that happens. So
I'll be honest with you, Simon. I believe that people use the fact that we're scared that other coaches are going to get this and do it themselves and get hurt. I think they use that as a vehicle to be able to throw their own opinion at you and say this shouldn't be done because I believe in this. Oh no, but it's about the safety of other people. I think that's a facade. and they just want to push their opinion onto you because they don't think it's right.
I think
that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I think it can be. I think it often comes back to my gut feel would say just build better relationships with your coaches that you work with, so that if you've got certain parameters that you want to work within, you know that your head coach isn't going to go off and do some madness that you haven't been told about or you don't get some input into. If you build strong working relationships with your coaches, then you can create parameters that, these activities be done within, and you build it together. And so if you burn bridges with coaches rather than building relationships, and that can kind of go sour that way. But also understanding, I think sometimes, and there probably are some coaches out there who just don't listen to their staff, and so the fear is that there's probably a head coach out there somewhere that'll just tell the water boy to shut up and run the warm-ups and fix all the players that get injured from some of the things that they want them to do. So at some levels there probably is it's probably a valid fear, but I think in a lot of contexts the more we can build relationships with our coaches, and instead of making those really fractured or having a lot of friction, then the more input that we can have. But that's probably just coming from my own experience with, I haven't operated in a working environment where I've had friction with the coach that I've worked with, and it's either been a coach that I know well and has brought me in for a reason, so they already trust me, or I've taken time to kind of build a relationship and build that trust before sort of stepping on any toes, or you just happen to get a coach who's open to feedback and open to other ideas, and they know that the people around them are experts in their field, and that's what they're there for, and they're willing to listen and learn and collaborate. So,
and sadly, we're in a world where people will see a 30-second clip and take some sort of offence and run with it and start shouting and bawling and crying about what someone else is doing, even though it doesn't affect their life. But that is the world of social media that we live in.
Yeah, it is. I think it's just that's society, and that's the world, as we talked about before. I think whether it's politics or religion or COVID or vaccination or whatever it might be, it doesn't pay to sit in the middle. If you're trying to build a business or create engagement, or if you're trying to win an election or whatever it might be, if you don't get followers through applying, talking about context and sitting in the middle of the grey on the spectrum, you have to pick a side, and it pays to be polarizing in the business world. Not so much when you're trying to operate in a team context and collaborate. You need to be able to understand context and work in the grey a little bit and have some shift there, but in other spaces, and especially on social media, it's about picking a team and being loyal to your team and being harshly aggressive towards the other team because your team has to win and be right. So, and so it's not an individual jab at anyone in particular. That's just the way that social media works. It's the way that the marketing strategies work, and that's what drives clicks and drives traffic and builds businesses. So it's just, so as you say, that's the way that the world works. Something gets put out there, and then people pick a side, either red or blue or whatever it might be, and then they just have to subscribe to that side and prove their loyalty to that side by fighting to the death against the other side, rather than trying to see the context. And so there's always someone will always chip in with talking about context, and then someone will talk about context not being relevant in all scenarios, and it goes backwards and forwards. But say that's what drives engagement and pushes algorithms to the top of things and gets something to stay a little bit longer than just the 24-hour cycle, or I don't even know what the Twitter cycle is, about an hour or two before things disappear off the feed. So you've got to be a bit more active there with just going to town on something and bringing it up to keep it at the top of the feed, whereas other media is a bit more of a 12 or a 24-hour cycle. And I don't know enough about that stuff. I haven't put enough time into building an individual online business yet. So it's but there's certainly some good information around how that works, and that's how tech companies have to work, and it's how a lot of different businesses have to work if you're working remotely or online. So
last little question on camp. Well, on pre-season, I guess. What is the marker for success? Obviously, be pre your first game, because that'll be seen as a marker of the success of the season, that them first couple of games. But up until that first game, what are your markers of success of that pre-season?
Yeah, there's going to be some interesting ones actually. Like with the snow freeze today, I think our players' ability to just accept and adapt to the situation that's been changing this week has shown some success in some of the work that bringing our mental skills coach in and working through some of those processes. The way that we're able to visibly see how much better our players are at coping with that stuff this year shows success in some of that investment. Playing in the freezing cold and in the snow on Saturday for 80 minutes is nothing compared to being freezing cold for 14 hours. So it'll be interesting to see if we see some success out of that. But I mean, on field results is always going to be, it has to kind of be a key marker in professional sport, especially if you've got an owner who wants you to win and they'll keep putting money in if you're winning and they won't if you don't. So which happens in different professional environments and so I think we will see some success from our group in terms of our cohesion on field and our ability to understand the game and just play what's in front of us, because we've been able to have a pre-season of installing some of our systems and structures so that's in the back of the mind, so the front of the mind our players can just play the picture in front of them and know that they've got a strategy to go back to, whereas last year we were still installing the foundations of our game through the first part of the season, so players were having to think too much about where to be in the system rather than looking at what's in front of them and seeing an opportunity and taking it. So by being able to assess how that happens sort of on field, we'll show sort of some success of the structure of our pre-season and just how rugby focused it really was. And just you see when you create genuine connections and you spend more time together that you see on defense how much players care about each other and care about the team when they're defending their line, and that's just rugby. The more a group cares about each other and the closer they feel and the more they've been through together, the better they defend their line as a group. And so I've seen that in a number of different teams in a number of different environments, and you see teams that aren't slated to win go through some adversity on the way to the game and pull together tighter. A bus breaks down and they have to wait around and you turn up just before kickoff, and you'd think that they're going to get pumped because they haven't had the ideal preparation, and that just galvanizes the group and they end up winning against the odds kind of thing. So some of the experiences that we've been able to go through as a group and some of the adversity kind of last year, both on field and off field, to see some growth in the group and how they cope with some big situations in games when it really counts will be a really good measure. And I think we've been able to see there's a couple of, they're probably a bit, always a bit theoretical, or I'm not, or a little bit in the grey and hocus pocus, but I think just the way that our players have approached, there's a couple of examples at the end of the game. In San Diego, we were supposed to be able to play 3 periods of 30 minutes, but San Diego still waiting for some players to come from overseas, so we had to sort of cut that down to 2 periods of 30 minutes, and we had a first half, first 30-minute team and a second 30-minute team, and then we played ourselves for the last 30 minutes and went down and we weren't good in that game at getting across the line or defending our line 5 metres out, and that was a real work on for us last year. So we just went and spent extra minutes doing just continuous goal line attack and defence with some interspersed kind of running efforts and extra conditioning to try and get the physical load that we wanted to get out of the game but weren't able to, and our players just sort of pulled their socks up and got on with it. And then the same happened against New York at the weekend. They were hoping to bring a large number of players, and we were going to get 3 times 40 minutes, and we could have had 3 different 15s kind of play, or we could have got 60 or 80 minutes into some guys to get ready for this round, and then they had a COVID outbreak in the group and couldn't bring as many people as planned, and so we played 2 lots of 40 minutes. So some guys missed out, but the guys that needed extra minutes after full time quickly shook hands and went down, and we played we played conditioning games for another 15 minutes. And there's a lot of teams that I've worked with that if I told them we were going to play con games for 15 minutes after they'd just played a game and won 62 points to 7, they'd wonder why. But the group's just used to getting on with the job and working with that. So I think they really trust the process and they care about what we're doing, and we see that with their response to some of those things. And it looks mad from the outside in a way, but it's there for a reason, because it's replacing something in the plan that unfortunately disappeared on us through no fault of the opposition. But we wanted to make sure that we achieved our targets, and so we just found another way to do it, and they just accepted and adapted and got on with the job. So how we go this weekend will be a great determining factor of that, because this team's, I think, in the 4 seasons that have happened, have never won the first round. And before last season, they had a winless season in 2018, and I think they'd won 4 games in 4 years or something. So, which they managed to turn the corner last year and have a winning season and just narrowly miss out on finals. But the work that's been put in, everybody else is better prepared. We're better prepared this year, but so is everyone else. So it'll just be able to see this group execute in some key moments. And a couple of things they did last year was they just freak out in key moments. 5 metres from the line, an opportunity to win the match, and rather than be excited, they were worried about stuffing it up and didn't execute the play and didn't score, and all of a sudden under the posts at the other end. So little things like that, being able to just be calm and clear in key moments, and be fit enough to execute under fatigue, and just be clear of mind at key parts of the game when there's a lot of different moving parts, and adapt to the pictures that are in front of us. So very long-winded, sort of random, loopy answer to the question. I'd love to be able to say it would just be based on metrics and running PB Broncos and things. But as we all know, those things are great, and we've been able to do some of that as well. But this group could be benching, squatting, and PBing speed and Broncos and fitness testing times, and be shit at rugby. So hopefully we've got the balance right through our preparation, and we get the transfer of the cross training that we've done, but we just execute in some key rugby moments and have a team that really cares about each other and wins a championship at the end of the year, and when we can tag people that said we were doing dumb things on day one.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously from a physical preparation point of view, you've got your numbers, you've got your tests, you've got your like you say, your PBs. For all them things that you've just described, you can't measure 99% of those things. Is that your experience that has made you comfortable in this area the area that you just described? Because I'm guessing probably 5 years out from in your first role, you would have been very much, I want to hit this number, I want to hit that number. But now, is it because of the experience that you're able to be comfortable describing it like that in a non-measurable way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Ash Jones is a great mentor, and it was very early that he sort of pointed me towards the quote, everything that counts can't be measured, and everything that can be measured doesn't necessarily count. So it's... And you do learn and see that, and you understand the value of chasing targets at times and getting progression and wanting to see transfer. But also, I was really fortunate with some of the teams that I've been at to see some of the best players in the world, and some of the best players in the world don't hit the best metrics in the world, and some of the best athletes in the world aren't very good rugby players. So, and there's a couple of freaks that are both, but. You start to see some of the sort of the intangible or not so measurable things become really important. And people mention that culture trumps strategy, whatever your views are on culture and your definition of that word. But it's some of the stuff that you get used to seeing when you're exposed to team environments over time, and you get to see what world class looks like on a daily basis, and sort of understanding it, and the fact that you could absolutely nail everything perfectly and not get a result as well, and just being able to kind of embrace that and know that it's one thing I've always been aware of is, I get to either have conversations or be on podcasts or talk at conferences, because the team that I was with was really successful, but who knows whether I was doing a good job or not. Maybe we just had a lot of really good players, and the Blues weren't winning a whole lot at the time, but they could have been running a far better program than we were. It just happened to be that the results weren't showing on the rugby field for different reasons, and so you can see their growth and progression of what they've done over time, and just how strong that team is from some measurable stuff, but also some intangible stuff too. So, you do probably get more comfortable with it over time, and I've been able to live through, teams that have done poorly, no matter how hard you try, and teams that have done really well when you're still trying just as hard. But a little bit of imposter syndrome kicks in, and you wonder whether it's am I actually contributing to this, or would they just win anyway because they're just so good? And it's potentially a little bit of both. So. Which was one of the reasons to come up here and do something new, is to get out of that comfort zone and challenge yourself and see something rewarding and start at the bottom of the climb, rather than just try and find a better way to plant the flag at the top of the mountain. So that's been a great experience. But I think a lot of that has come from just observation and experience in and around team environments, and seeing how different teams and different players go about it, and what really leads to success based on what's measurable and what's not.
Fascinating. Well, I'm gonna let you go, but I'm gonna say I really appreciate you giving up your time. Great chat. Got some controversy in there as well. Mentioned a few mentions of social media, which is not uncommon. And we'll see. Yeah, good luck at the weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
First game of the season.
I appreciate it. Really, I appreciate it. It's good to connect and chat again. And as I said, I can't go too hard at social media because I might need to build a business on there at some point. But I'm certainly pretty quiet on there these days. I don't have a lot of time to get on and share a whole lot. But like we said, there's some things within the industry and within society that can be sort of pretty polarizing at times, but it's because everybody's passionate about what they're doing. So, if nobody was talking about things, it would mean that they don't care, and none of us would have anything to do or talk about. So,
very well put once again. But where can people? I know you're not too active on social media.
Not a whole lot. I guess now that it's great, I've got some staff this year that are delivering some things, so I'm able to step back and kind of capture and share a few more things rather than being a one-man band. And but like st_performance coach on Instagram, and STSNC, just the whole word on Twitter is where I'll quite often pop up, or just through LinkedIn is probably where I'll share more kind of professional information and things that we're doing, and even anything that we do kind of at the moment through AG Rugby or Gilgronis, the drink name team. Everything's turned facing outwards, so we're sort of certainly not aiming to hide anything. Everything that we've done with growing our sports science department, we want to turn outwards, and how we integrate and collaborate across that. So through those channels, they do a much more polished version of sharing what we do than I do with a quick iPhone upload and a picture or a video and a quick caption. So
yeah, cool. I'll make sure I look out for it. The AG Rugby channel sounds like it's, like you say, outward facing, showing what you guys do.
Yeah, feel free to watch. Go online and watch Inside the Scrum, the rugby network that makes the MLR, and at the moment the League One competition in Japan, sort of broadcast free internationally. They've got the series on there. So if you want to get to know the personalities in behind our team, then sign up for an account and watch for free.
Absolutely. Right, mate, I'm going to let you shoot, but thank you very much, and we'll chat soon.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, Simon. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.